What's poppin', my Kingsmen? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is about to be a breakdown for Kingsman The Secret Service, one of my absolute favorite movies of all time because I love me some spy movies and I love me some Matthew Vaughn. That dude is a really creative director. So let's just get into it. Kingsman The Secret Service is a 2014 film directed by Matthew Vaughn, after having directed the first Kick-Ass movie in 2010, as well as X-Men First Class in 2011. Matthew Vaughn was actually under the assumption that he was going to direct the X-Men First Class sequel, Days of Future Past, so much so that he was actually the one who originally wrote the damn script. However, 20th Century Fox would screw him over when they revealed that they had a legal obligation to let Brian Peterfile Singer have first dibs at directing that movie. So, after getting disrespected like that, Matthew Vaughn would decide to do his own thing and direct this Kingsman movie instead. This actually would not be the first time Matthew Vaughn dealt with some shadiness from 20th Century Fox, as Matthew Vaughn was actually originally supposed to direct 2006 X-Men The Last Stand movie. However, Vaughn would drop out immediately when he discovered that 20th Century Fox was actually trying to trick Oscar-winning actress Halle Berry into signing on to X3 by giving her a fake X3 script. And in that fake script, Halle Berry's character Storm was going to end up saving a bunch of thirsty children in Africa by bringing some much-needed rain to their region. Unfortunately, this scene was only written down to make X3 look appealing to Halle Berry, with Fox fully intending to scrap the entire idea the second that she signed the legally binding contract to appear in X-Men The Last Stand. Absolutely disgusted by the audacity to do such a talented actress dirty, Matthew Vaughn took his integrity and dipped and decided to instead direct the movie Stardust that would release in 2007. But all this aside, Kingsman The Secret Service is yet another one of Vaughn's film adaptations of a comic book written by Mark Millar, with Kick-Ass, of course, being the first Millar comic that Vaughn has tackled. If y'all want to see a breakdown of the first Kick-Ass movie, y'all can check it out here, by the way. But unlike Kick-Ass, the name of Matthew Vaughn's film adaptation was actually changed slightly from the comic book material, as Mark Millar's original comic was purely called The Secret Service when Millar first released those comics back in 2012 with the now defunct Icon Comics, with the Kingsman title only coming with this film adaptation. And to show that this movie is indeed a Matthew Vaughn joint, the movie begins with an opening animation for Matthew Vaughn's production company Marv, with the company's logo being designed like an Ishihara vision test to test color blindness, an inside joke by Vaughn and his colleagues to poke fun at Matthew Vaughn's own color blindness that makes him incapable of seeing his own damn logo. And as the sounds of Money for Nothing by the Dire Straits plays in the background, we are brought to the Middle East circa 1997, a time of intense acts of terrorism in the region. The camera then zooms into a nearby building where we can see Kingsman agents Galahad and Merlin interrogating an enemy combatant for crucial information alongside two other Kingsman trainees, with these Kingsman codenames, of course, having been ripped straight from the legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. After British soldier Eggsy Unwin sacrifices his life to protect Agent Galahad, aka Harry, we can see the slightly de-aged face of Colin Firth as he removes his mask in shock and apologizes to Merlin for missing the grenade that took Lee's life. Merlin is of course played by actor Mark Strong, who returns to work with director Matthew Vaughn yet again after starring in 2007's Stardust as Prince Septimus, as well as 2010's Kick-Ass 1 as the ruthless villain Frank D'Amico. And as Eggsy Unwin's body is still sizzling on the ground before them, Harry follows protocol by immediately congratulating James Spencer on his new promotion to Agent Lancelot, as Spencer's only competitor for the Lancelot title has now been killed. James Spencer is played by Jack Davenport, who is famous for playing the character James Norrington in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. To inform Eggsy Unwin's next of kin of Lee's demise, Harry heads on over to the home of his widow, Michelle Unwin, to give her a Medal of Valor with a special phone number on the back that she can call whenever she might need to get out of trouble. However, when Michelle rejects this government gift, Harry decides to give it to a 5 to 6-year-old Eggsy, who promises to keep it safe. Then, after a very sick transition via young Eggsy's snow globe, we are transported 17 years into the future closer to the mountains of Argentina, where physics professor James Arnold has been kidnapped by a gang of goons working on behalf of the movie's villain, Richmond Valentine, with James Arnold, of course, being played by cinema legend Mark Hamill. This scene is actually a nod to the opening of Mark Millar's very first The Secret Service issue, a comic that opened with actual actor Mark Hamill having been kidnapped by men working on behalf of the comic's villain, James Arnold. But instead of Mark Hamill playing himself like it was in the comic book, Matthew Vaughn decided to give Mark Hamill the name of the villain of the comic book, James Arnold, and then change the villain's name for this movie to Richmond Valentine. This is actually the second time Matthew Vaughn has changed the name of the villain from the source material written by Mark Millar, as he did so in the first Kick-Ass movie when he changed the name of the villain from John Genovese to Frank D'Amico. After gently removing the tape from Dr. Arnold's mouth, one of the goons tells Arnold that they're all under strict orders to not harm him, and even offers him a glass of whiskey so good that it'll apparently make him shit his pants. But before the doctor could take a dip into his diarrhea drink, in comes Agent Lancelot with the silencer to make quick work of all of these bad guys. I love how Matthew Vaughn even made sure that Lancelot's gun matched the gun of British Secret Service agent Bimbo, who rescues Mark Hamill in the comics. You know, before a bad parachute would hilariously get both Agent Bimbo and Mark Hamill killed during their escape. And after Lancelot takes a victory sip of the 1962 Dalmore, one of the most expensive whiskeys in the world, valued at around $250,000 per bottle, Lancelot doesn't get the chance to poop his pants before a knock at the door distracts him long enough for Gazelle to cut him clean in half. And when I say clean, it was very clean, not a bit of blood on the ground, which is very surprising considering that all of his blood should be on the ground. Gazelle is played by actress Sofia Boutella, who recently starred in Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon movies. Originally, Matthew Vaughn apparently wanted famous snowboarder Amy Purdy to portray the role of Gazelle, as she herself was actually a badass double amputee in real life. However, because filming would have risked an appearance at the Olympics for her, she would apparently decline. Matthew Vaughn's adaptation of Gazelle is actually gender swapped from the one in the comics, as Gazelle was originally just some bald dude. But Vaughn would make it up to bald dudes everywhere by casting Samuel L. Jackson in the role of Richmond Valentine, who only walks in the building to talk to Dr. Arnold as soon as Gazelle covers up all the bloody mess, showing us that Valentine is just as squeamish as his comic book counterpart James Arnold is. I especially love this moment of Valentine meeting up with Arnold because this is actually the second time Samuel L. Jackson has kidnapped a member of the Skywalker family, as we would of course see Jackson hunt down the Anakin Skywalker actor Hayden Christensen in 2008's Jumper, one of my favorite underrated movies of all time. As Valentine speaks, you can hear that he clearly speaks with a lisp, a decision that Jackson actually made independently in order to make Valentine feel more like a villain that you'd see in a James Bond movie, as most of Bond's villains tend to have some kind of unique physical imperfection of some kind. And not only this, but Jackson was also motivated to include this lisp as a nod to his own past, as he himself used to have a lisp that he had to get rid of to get himself some good acting jobs. Vaughn would agree to Jackson's improv because he himself deeply wanted this Kingsman movie to act as his own personal tribute to the classic Bond movies and the spy genre in general, as Vaughn has been dying to make a spy movie of his own for years, and Vaughn's love for the spy genre is mostly due to the spy media he consumed when he was younger, including 1961's The Avengers, 1964's The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and 1967's In Like Flint. Anyways, after Valentine assures Arnold that he has nothing to worry about because they're about to be best friends, we are brought to the streets of Westminster as Harry heads to the local Kingsman shop, a shop that has stood as a front for the Kingsman spy organization since as early as 1901. The use of tailor shops as secret hideouts for British secret agents was actually a thing that started during both world wars, so it's fitting that such a secret hideout is included here. Matthew Vaughn's 2021 Kingsman prequel movie, The King's Man, shows us a bit of this history when we see the Kingsman tailor shop in the World War I era. Harry then heads to the meeting room where Michael Caine's Chester King, aka Agent Arthur, is waiting for him at his not-so-round table to start their super cool high-tech spyglasses meeting. And during the meeting, the group pays their respects to the fallen Lancelot, and as they do, we see Lancelot's information projected on a nearby mirror, where we learn that he was born on May 28th, 1975, and that it was December 2nd, 1997 when Eggsy's father was killed and James Spencer was named Lancelot. And outside of his height and weight, we also learn that James Spencer was married, as a Mrs. Spencer can be seen listed as his next of kin, which is quite sad. And needless to say, it's probably going to be a closed casket funeral for the Spencer family. And after a quick toast to Lancelot, Arthur orders all the agents to propose a candidate to replace Lancelot before Mark Strong's Merlin comes in and gives Harry and Chester a lowdown on what Lancelot was working on before he caught a slice with Gazelle. Merlin tells the two of James Arnold, a climate change doomsayer of an Imperial College professor obsessed with a concept called Gaia theory, which is a real theory first posited by chemist James Lovelock and biologist Lynn Margulis in 1972, which basically views the entire planet as a massive, singular living organism, with all life on the planet serving to regulate the overall health of the planet itself, a belief that we would later learn Richmond Valentine very much subscribes to. Hence why it appears that James Arnold was more than happy to sign himself up to help Valentine purify the planet of the human virus. And we also learn from James Arnold's files that he was born on April 3rd, 1955, which is actually 4 years after Mark Hamill's actual birthday on September 25th, 1951. But anyways, after this information dump, Chester King Arthur tells his loyal knight Galahad to choose a better Lancelot candidate this time around, implying that Eggsy's father was not a good enough candidate because he didn't grow up in a similar high-class background. But later on, towards the end of the movie, when Chester King curses Eggsy right before he dies, we can actually hear Chester King drop his fancy accent to reveal his true Cockney accent underneath, implying that he was actually no better than those he found himself superior to. Then we're finally introduced to the Eggsy of the modern day, as played by actor Taron Egerton. Other actors Vaughn considered for the role of Eggsy include John Boyega, his kick-ass broski Aaron Taylor Johnson, as well as Daniel Kaluuya, with Daniel actually being the one closest to getting the role, which I think would have been super baller. Eggsy is of course just a nickname, as his government name is actually Gary Unwin. In the original The Secret Service comic, the name of the main character is actually Gary London, which I personally think is way better, but hey, I ain't gonna roast you, Eggsy. In Eggsy's room, we can see that he keeps a photo of his father on his shelf, as well as a poster for 2013's Crysis 3 video game on his wall, showing that Eggsy is a bit of a gamer himself. But he is a gamer with style, as a good number of Nike shoeboxes can be seen around his room as well. Eggsy is then called out of his room by his mom's douche of a boyfriend, Dean, as they all watch a news report on the impact of global warming, underscoring the overall central theme of this movie. Annoyed at his mom's horrible taste in men, Eggsy heads out to the Black Prince pub with his boys, Jamal and Ryan, only for dumbass Jamal to cause trouble with one of Dean's boys by pointing directly at his face while talking about him. But instead of getting into a fight, Eggsy steals Rottweiler's car keys and goes on a joyride in his yellow car that quickly evolves into a police chase. A chase that ends with Eggsy willingly wrecking the car instead of running over an innocent dog. A fantastic piece of foreshadowing towards Eggsy's future refusal to shoot the dog that Kingsman gave him to raise later on in the film. Comic book Gary London would also similarly steal a yellow car with his friends in the comics that he would also deliberately crash to save a dog on the street. Eggsy then tells his boys to dip before the police arrest him and bring him in for questioning, with future Galactus actor Ralph Ineson being the one to attempt to push Eggsy into giving up his friends, something Eggsy flat out refuses to do, establishing that Eggsy is a deeply loyal person, with that loyalty being tested by Kingsman in a different way later on in the film when Eggsy is tested on those train tracks. Up Schitt's Creek, Eggsy decides to finally call the number on the back of the Medal of Valor, leading Harry to immediately get Eggsy cleared from all charges. After Harry reintroduces himself to an older Eggsy, Eggsy brings him to the Black Prince pub, where Harry tells Eggsy all about how great his father was and how much of a disappointment Eggsy has become. And then, after Eggsy tells Harry off for sounding pretentious, oh my god, wouldn't you know it, in comes Dean's dogs, Rottweiler and Poodle, back in the same pub they usually frequent, which kinda makes you wonder why Eggsy ever came back to that pub in the first place. But because these douchebags were all fresh out of manners that day and would not let Harry finish the rest of his drink in peace, Harry would proceed to give those rude boys a spanking, Kingsman style. And man, is this scene one of my absolute favorite action sequences in all of cinema, because I love how Matthew Vaughn perfectly syncs up the action with the music in the background while simultaneously centering all the action in the middle of the screen so the audience never really gets lost. And also, apparently, Colin Firth did strict and strenuous 3-hour workouts every day for 6 months to get himself shredded and fit enough to kick ass during this movie. Actually, according to the film's stunt coordinator, Colin Firth actually ended up doing most of his own stunts, like 80% of them. But Colin Firth is not alone, as Taron Egerton also did crazy amounts of training to get shredded for this movie, apparently radically changing his lifestyle and eating habits just so he could see his abs forever immortalized on the big screen. Apparently this dude was 194 pounds of mostly muscle and only 12% body fat, so you can definitely tell that your boy was dedicated to the role. But anyways, after Harry lets off some steam, he says his goodbyes to Eggsy and places a tracker/audio recording device on Eggsy's jacket. Eggsy then heads home, and when he enters the apartment, Dean and his mother are there waiting for him, while watching a news segment covering the red carpet premiere of the Richmond Valentine movie, produced by 20th Century Fox, the same producers of this movie. This report is immediately followed by a story about the disappearance of rapper Iggy Azalea, a disappearance likely linked to Valentine's future plans for his New World Order. A New World Order filled with incredibly shitty rappers, apparently. I'm so sorry, that's so mean. Iggy Azalea actually made a track for the Kingsman soundtrack called Heavy Crown, featuring Ellie Goulding, so that's likely why she got a shout out in this scene in this movie. But Iggy Azalea is not the only one who gets a shout out during this scene, as we can see a case of Red Bull on the top of the fridge as Eggsy walks into the apartment. The Red Bull skydiving team were actually the ones who acted as the stunt actors for the Kingsman trainees during the skydiving scene later on in the movie, as Vaughn wanted the skydiving to be filmed authentically rather than in a green screen room. Eggsy's plan of sharing a singular parachute with Roxy is actually a technique called Mr. Bill for some odd reason. And while the Red Bull skydivers achieved it flawlessly, actually pulling off a Mr. Bill at the speed Eggsy and Roxy were going is extremely unlikely in real life. But I am getting ahead of myself. Dean then starts beating Eggsy up for information on the fancy man who just gave his gang internal and external bleeding. However, this Eggsy refuses to crack, even at the threat of getting butchered by Dean himself. It is only when Eggsy demonstrates that he's a loyal person does Harry intervene to keep Dean from hurting Eggsy, threatening to have Dean arrested for his lifestyle of crime. Then, after Eggsy uses some impressive parkour skills to evade Dean's crew, my guy heads on over to the Kingsman Tailor Shop, a shop heavily inspired by the Huntsman tailors on Savile Row in London. Harry then takes Eggsy to the fitting room in the back and tells Eggsy that he's a good and loyal man with potential before bringing up 1983's Trading Places as well as 1990's Nikita and Pretty Woman. And he brings these movies up in order to illustrate to Eggsy that despite not being born rich or in a position of power, Eggsy too can transform himself to be anything that he wanted to be, just like the main characters of those films, as well as 1964's My Fair Lady, a much older movie that Eggsy somehow knows better than those other more recent ones. Then, after Eggsy agrees to become a spy for Kingsman, Harry initiates the fitting room elevator before giving Eggsy a history lesson on the Kingsman organization and how they were founded in the year 1849 as a regular tailor shop for powerful people. A tailor shop that quickly turned into an independent peace-protecting spy agency when a good number of these tailors' children died fighting in World War I, meaning that there were millions of pounds of inheritance that were just going to go to waste anyway. So, using this inheritance money, the Kingsman spy organization would become the new knights for the Kingdom of England and the world at large. Then the two hop into an underground bullet pod, which sends them directly to the main Kingsman headquarters. The exterior for Kingsman HQ is actually a real place in Hertfordshire, England, called Wrotham Park. But anyways, Harry then brings Eggsy to meet Merlin and the rest of the candidates for the Lancelot title. Merlin then immediately tells the group that their training is about to be dangerous as hell before warning them that their families would be in danger too if they ever told anyone about anything that they did with the agency. And Merlin, of course, gives these instructions with a heavy Scottish accent, which was not originally the intent for the character, as Matthew Vaughn actually initially wanted Mark Strong to play Merlin with a Welsh accent. However, Mark Strong struggled hardcore with getting that Welsh accent down, so Vaughn would throw that bald badass a bone and let him switch up the tone. Eggsy then meets Roxanne Morton, aka Roxy, who assures Eggsy that Merlin was merely using standard military scare tactics and that all of the recruits were not really in any danger. But that would prove to be untrue in both the movie and for the members of the actual production, because the following scene where Merlin floods the barracks with water almost got a bunch of crew members and actors killed. This flooding scene was actually one of the first things Matthew Vaughn and his crew filmed on the very first day of shooting. And apparently, after a week and a half of meticulously planning the scene out, a random mechanism glitched out, causing all the water that they had stored to prematurely flood the space, causing the actors, camera, and sound people to all be forced to swim and survive under 20 feet of water. But luckily, nobody died, so that's always nice. I hear drowning tends to do a number on one's social life, so good for Taron Egerton and all of his friends. But after Eggsy thinks outside the box and smashes Merlin's one-way mirror to save the group, Merlin fails the entire group for failing to save a recruit named Amelia. Later on in the movie, we would learn that Amelia was actually a member of Kingsman already, and that she was always meant to fake her death in order to underscore the lesson of teamwork being the root of survival. This actually makes sense because when everyone decided to shove tubes in the toilets for air, we can see Amelia purposely swimming in the opposite direction when Eggsy first goes for the door. But anyways, while all this is happening, Valentine is in the Oval Office pitching his plans for a global cleanse of humans for the greater good of the planet to former President Barack Obama, who is apparently intrigued at Valentine's extremely radical idea. Alright, technically, I can't really say this is Barack Obama because since the release of the movie, Matthew Vaughn has revealed that this unnamed president character was merely a parody of Obama and not meant to be actual President Obama himself. And seeing as the president's head does explode by the end of this movie, I can see why Vaughn wanted to create some distance between this character and actual Barack Obama. Harry then decides to pop by London's Imperial College to have an enlightening chat with Mark Hamill about the Force. The anthropogenic force to be exact, which is basically the force/effect that human beings have on the global environment as a whole, which was essentially Professor James Arnold's area of expertise. However, Harry quickly drops the bullshit and begins to forcefully pick Arnold's brain about who kidnapped him and killed his Kingsman colleague. But Harry would apparently pick his brain too damn hard, as the explosive planted in Arnold's head would be triggered by Valentine to keep Arnold from talking. And in order to evade gunfire from Arnold's security, Harold is forced to detonate a bomb that ends up injuring his own self. And as Merlin takes care of him, Harry gets a visit from Arthur, who inquires about how long Harry is going to be out and if Harry's footage of the event was accessible to the agency, solely interested in what Harry could have possibly found out instead of whether or not Harry was okay, because Arthur is of course also secretly working for Richmond Valentine. But unfortunately for Arthur, Harry keeps all of his data locked up tight. And upset at having to kill Dr. Arnold, Valentine then accelerates the production of his emotionally manipulating SIM cards, while Eggsman and the Kingsman trainees all get new dogs to train while they train, with Eggsy calling his pug JB after Kiefer Sutherland's agent Jack Bauer from the hit TV show 24. Weeks of Eggsy's training go by until Harry finally wakes up. Merlin, Harry, and Eggsy then look over the footage from Dr. Arnold's death and trace the detonation signal to Richmond Valentine himself. Harry then immediately decides to go undercover to an upcoming dinner gala hosted by Valentine with the undercover name of Mr. DeVere. This fake name is actually a reference to director Matthew Vaughn's full legal name, Matthew Allard DeVere Drummond. The Vaughn in Matthew Vaughn's name actually comes from his birth name of Matthew Allard Robert Vaughn. In Richmond Valentine's house, we can actually see Andy Warhol's 1981 painting titled Gun on his walls, with this same painting also having been seen on the walls of Kick-Ass 1 villain Frank D'Amico, played by Mark Strong. And while the two have a conversation about how doomed planet Earth is over some Mickey D's, Harry quotes Professor James Arnold directly, which immediately confirms Valentine's suspicions of Harry working for the same mysterious people that tried to rescue Arnold at the beginning of the film. Valentine then switches the conversation to their mutual love for the classic Bond movies that inspired Vaughn to adapt the Kingsman franchise in the first place. And after their dinner, Harry thanks Valentine for a happy meal, a reference to the famous McDonald's kids meals. A little bit after this, Eggsy passes yet another test proving his loyalty to Kingsman, making both him and Roxanne the two finalists for Kingsman titles. Eggsy then heads to Harry's office to tell Harry of his success, with the walls of Harry's office being covered in tabloid headlines from The Sun, with each headline representing a day when a crisis didn't make headlines at all. Harry tells Eggsy that a true gentleman only makes the newspapers when he's born, when he gets married, and when he dies. Harry then follows this gentlemanly lesson up the next day by quoting Ernest Hemingway when he said, "There's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self, and that the true aim of being a gentleman is being comfortable in one's own skin, not just putting on fancy sounding accents like in My Fair Lady." And even though this quote is often attributed to Ernest Hemingway, it is actually first said by writer W.L. Sheldon in his 1897 essay titled What to Believe, an Ethical Creed. Then the two enter the tailor shop, and Harry gets Eggsy acquainted with the weapons of a Kingsman agent. And these weapons include poison-tipped Oxford shoes, munition-firing umbrellas, hand pistols that double as shotguns, pens that remotely activate poison, a lighter that doubles as a hand grenade, an electrified signet ring, and watches that can put people to sleep and even give them amnesia. But then, to the shock of Harry, the two run into Richmond Valentine himself as they all walk out of their fitting rooms. Valentine mentions that he's only there to get a fancy suit like Harry's to attend the Royal Ascot racecourse, to which Harry recommends that Valentine go to Lock & Company in order to buy a decent hat, with Lock & Company actually being a real store in London. Valentine actually ends up taking that advice and going to Lock & Company to get a hat, while also getting a tracker placed on that hat by Kingsman as well. Then the movie transitions to Eggsy and Roxanne's final challenge of shooting their beloved dogs, something that Eggsy refuses to do, causing him to be kicked out of Kingsman consideration by Arthur, making Roxy the next Lancelot. Angry at his expulsion, Eggsy then steals Arthur's car and heads back home. And as Eggsy looks into his bedroom mirror while wearing his old civilian clothes, we can see a Millwall Football Club scarf hanging on his mirror, a possible nod to how Dean actor Jeff Bell portrayed the Millwall firm's leader, Tommy Hatcher, in the 2005 film Green Street Hooligans. But speaking of Jeff Bell, once Eggsy sees that his mother's got a fresh new black eye, Eggsy goes to confront Dean about it personally, similarly to what happened to Eggsy's comic book counterpart in issue 4. However, unlike the comics, Eggsy would not get the chance to kick Dean's ass himself, as Harry would hijack Eggsy's stolen Kingsman car with his tablet and bring Eggsy to him. There he reveals that the guns given to both him and Roxy had blanks in them, and that Kingsman never intended on harming the dogs, nor any of the trainees. However, blanks were not originally Vaughn's plans for this movie, because he straight up wanted Eggsy, Roxy, Harry, and all of the Kingsman agents to have killed a dog they grew close to at the start of their career. However, one of Vaughn's colleagues reminded Vaughn that the world loves dogs too damn much, and that such an act might turn the audience off from the heroes of the film. Meanwhile, it seems like Valentine's Day at the Royal Ascot was a big success, as he has apparently gotten a bunch of British dignitaries to sign onto his maniacal plot, including the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince of Wales, the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Princes George and Harry, the Countess of Wessex, the Prince Royal, the Duke of Gloucester, and the Duke and Duchess of Kent. Harry would then immediately overhear Valentine talk about some type of test at South Glade Mission Church in Kentucky, so Harry would cut his chastising of Eggsy short to head directly there. However, when Harry gets there, he is quickly greeted by this church's extremely hateful rhetoric, with this church likely taking big inspiration from the controversial Christian cosplayers at the hateful Westboro Baptist Church based in Topeka, Kansas. And even though this is a church on a Sunday, good lord, does all hell break loose anyway during Harry's visit, as Valentine's SIM cards have successfully caused the entire congregation to enter a blood-lusted brawl with one another while Freebird by Leonard Skinner plays in the background. A full 7 days of filming was dedicated to this 4.5-minute sequence of over 100 people continuously fighting alone. And it's one of the scenes that challenged Colin Firth the most physically, as this dude literally had to ice over 40 crazy Christians. And this scene was actually going to be 3 minutes longer than it actually was, but comic book creator Mark Millar convinced Vaughn to cut it down significantly. And it was actually going to be a lot more gruesome and gory as well, but they had to tone all of that down to avoid an 18+ rating for the film. This chaos is introduced in a similar but different way in the original Secret Service comic, because instead of a massacre happening at a church, it occurred at a beach wedding in Hawaii instead at the start of the second issue. But anyways, after the massacre, only Kingsman agent Galahad is left standing. That is, until Richmond Valentine would shoot Galahad point blank in the head, seemingly killing him. A death that would ultimately be reversed in the movie sequel, Kingsman The Golden Circle. Harry's comic book counterpart would also share a similar demise from the villain of the comic books, but he would get shot in the head while looking through a peephole right after sleeping with the villain's girlfriend in issue 5. The death of Harry rattles Eggsy enough to head on down to Kingsman to attempt to do something, but Eggsy quickly realizes through the surgical incision on the back of Arthur's ear that Arthur has joined Valentine's cause. And when Eggsy refuses to join up with Arthur, Arthur tries to kill Eggsy by activating a poison he placed in Eggsy's drink. However, evil Alfred was too damn slow to notice Eggsy using his light-fingered thief tactics to swap glasses, thus causing Arthur to end his own life by accident like a big old British goof. Eggsy then meets up with Merlin and Roxy, and the three of them resolve to head to Valentine's secret base in the mountains of Russia. And as they make their way there, Valentine gives his low-energy crowd a rousing speech about how they shouldn't feel bad about the coming culling. Valentine makes a number of biblical references while doing so, like when he calls all of them the chosen ones, much like God called the Israelites in the Old Testament, and when he even compares himself to the biblical figure of Noah, and how Noah was not meant to be the bad guy of the story, just for providing a safe haven for an apocalypse. And Valentine even ends his speech with the words, "Eat, drink, and party," which is a reference to the phrase, "Eat, drink, and be merry," which has its origins in the Bible, in such Bible verses such as Luke 12:19, Proverbs 23:25, Isaiah 22:13, and 1 Corinthians 15:32. Samuel L. Jackson is of course no stranger to playing characters familiar with the Bible, as he famously played the intimidating Jules Winfield in the classic Pulp Fiction movie. Eggsy, now in his fresh new Kingsman suit that Harry had tailored for him before he died, then arrives at Valentine's compound under the guise of the recently deceased Chester King, aka Arthur, with Merlin as his trusty pilot. And while in character, Eggsy calls Merlin Mycroft, which is famously the name of Sherlock Holmes' brother. And while Mark Strong never played the character of Mycroft himself, he did star in the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes film from 2009 as Lord Blackwood. Eggsy then makes his way to the main area where the festivities are being held and quickly knocks out the Prime Minister of Sweden so that he can give Merlin access to the mainframe. However, as soon as Roxy successfully blows up Valentine's satellites using some extremely high-altitude balloons, Eggsy is exposed by Charlie, whose family was also invited by Valentine to join his new world. And while making his escape from the compound, Eggsy uses his gun skills that he learned from both Kingsman and the Marines to make short work of Valentine's guards, with us even getting a dope first-person view of all of this action. Director Matthew Vaughn seems to really love giving his audience a video game-esque first-person view when it comes to firefights in his movies, as Hit Girl in Kick-Ass 1 also got a very similar treatment while trying to rescue Big Daddy and Kick-Ass. However, as soon as Eggsy gets back on the plane, Merlin tells him to get back to Valentine's headquarters because Valentine locked him out and is planning on borrowing a backup satellite from famed cringelord Elon Musk, who apparently is also on board with Richmond Valentine's plan, to the absolute shock of no one. That is 100% something that Elon Musk would do, because Elon Musk is Elon Musk. But while Eggsy is getting pinned down by Valentine's forces, Merlin gets the genius idea to just explode the heads of all the assholes with a microchip in the back of their necks, allowing Eggsy to reach Valentine and Gazelle with ease. And just in time too, because the entire world has been going to shit as a result of Valentine's signal, with Eggsy's mother even going so far as to go after Eggsy's own baby sister with a knife. But luckily, after a dope fight with Gazelle herself that ends with Gazelle getting a dose of the poison in Eggsy's shoe, Eggsy would save the day by throwing one of Gazelle's knife legs through Valentine's chest, disengaging the madness completely. And after getting some ass from Swedish Princess Tilde as a much-deserved reward, the movie ends with Eggsy finally getting to kick Dean's ass in the bar in the same way that Harry did at the beginning of the film. Because Dean has no manners, and every gentleman knows that manners maketh man. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown for Kingsman The Secret Service. You guys are amazing. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell to get notifications for every time we upload a video. And of course, the Heavy Spoiler store is there for you and all of your clothing and merch needs. So head on over there today to get you something cool. But yeah, you guys are amazing like always for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.